The next panel for coastal hazards, we have 6 speakers. I'm sorry, I have my camera off there. And again, thanks to everybody for submitting your slides prior to the talk today. I know everybody usually works in the final hours because you're so overworked, but I appreciate you getting them in on time. And we're going to kick it off with Bill Lynch's the Underwater Gulf Glider Group, and he's going to give an overview on that before we jump into specific talks about what organizations need as far as what GCOOS may provide for them. So Bill, all yours. And Bill's a longtime GCOOS board member as well.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Again, I'm Bill Lynch. I'm the Underwater Glider User Group Coordinator. And honestly, when Chris put me under the coastal hazards, I thought, well, I got to sort of put an operational component to this. So I'll be talking about UG2 and the importance of it, but tied into a specific mission. Next slide. Seems to be a slide missing, but it's the glider. What's the primary mission of your organization? It's so the U.S. Glider Users Group mission is to facilitate coordination and collaboration of gliders, technology, and operations for research and decision makers. And this is really regardless of funding source, project, or program. It's agnostic to that. And we accomplish this through workshops, which we just had one recently, webinars, Slack, and focus working groups as well that break off from the workshops and from other efforts that are going on. IUS is the funder of UG2, and a shout out to GCOOS because they're instrumental in filling the position and executing that. So if we go to the first slide here, like I mentioned, UG2 does not directly contribute data for decision making, but creates a forum for operators for managers. I'm sorry. Okay, to share info and optimize these data for research and operational use. And so for purposes of today's, real quick, I just felt like it was, since it's a coastal hazard panel discussion, I like to focus and pick an operational sort of focus. And I picked the hurricane effort, which is an IUS effort led by Kathleen Bailey, and it's really a multi-regional effort as well. But it's appropriate as we wind down the hurricane season. So, you know, whether we're talking near-term evacuations and longer-term coastal resiliency projects, hurricanes create havoc to coastal communities that impact our lives. So critical to forecasting hurricane intensity, it's not only the atmospheric conditions, but getting that ocean right. So as well as to feed the couple models that ultimately drive the forecast. So significant features like the loop current, eddies, and salinity need to be monitored, measured, and assimilated to NOAA's models. And really, the only way this can be accomplished is through collaboration, partnerships, and sharing. So one part of the hurricane effort is we set up like a Slack channel, and people can communicate at the in real time or near real time on deploying assets to support missions like this. And go to the next slide. So, I mean, what are your top 2 current or emerging information needs? If you're focused just on the mission of the hurricanes, it's really important to have temperature and salinity profiles that can be assimilated into the models. So understanding that heat content in that upper 100 meters is critical. Additional salinity is very critical, as freshwater layers can inhibit mixing and cooling of waters, but that all contribute to rapid intensification. So getting your glider data that is not research or project sensitive to the NOAA glider DAC to be assimilated into the models is critical. So even if your even if your mission is not hurricane related, and you can get the temperature and salinity data to the DAC, that is very critical. So I'm pushing that as a collaborative effort across the community. Next slide. So again, being able to, in wrapping this up, whether we're planning evacuations ahead of a hurricane or developing coastal resiliency plans, these data are critical. So this glider effort in coordination with other observing systems needs that sustainable funding to plan for spatial and temporal sampling throughout the hurricane season. But really the most important part of this is the partnerships, and that, you know, across whether it be academia, government, industry, across the whole thing. And the UG2 provides that forum to be able to collaborate and share information. And this really could apply to monitoring marine mammals, hypoxia, algae blooms or whatnot. But you know, the key thing here, and I'll put a link to where you can join UG2 if you're not a part of that, is the information sharing that needs to take place to be able to accomplish this and accomplish missions like this in the Gulf of Mexico. I think that's it.
Thanks, Bill. And Pat, I'm remiss in handing off to you. Pat's going to moderate the session for us. So Pat, from here on out, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks. No problem. Appreciate that. So thanks, Bill. The second speaker is Dr. Nan Walker, professor at the Department of Oceanography and Coastal Sciences at Louisiana State University. Go Fighting Tigers. Nan, take it away, please.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Well, nobody can talk. Okay, great. Yes, I'm a professor at LSU, and I have directed the EarthScan laboratory since 2003. I have been involved in the surveillance and study of coastal hazards and their impacts since becoming faculty in the 1990s. And our lab has used GCOOS East satellite extensively since the mid-1990s to track hurricane motion, its intensity, to track the loop current and the eddies, and as well as circulation during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, one example, which I'll share with you in a minute. I'd like to take my 4 minutes to discuss the integration of satellite image products and in situ data collected by GCOOS in support of coastal hazard surveillance and prediction. The Gandalf page, which you're probably all familiar with, already has a few satellite products as data layers, and that is an excellent start. In addition to expanding that page, I propose that a similar data viewer be developed in the future to visualize the high-frequency radar current measurements using a suite of satellite data offered as data layers. In support of this idea, I've chosen 2 images to show you. Both of these image panels show declouded GCOOS East SST images, sea surface temperature. They're produced each night from a series of about 100 SST images, and since we confine the time series to only 10 hours, we retain the SST fronts. The Gulf is a very cloudy place, in case you didn't know, and it requires special techniques to observe the ocean on a daily basis. This is one of the products for which we have GCOOS funding. The left panel depicts circulation during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in mid-May 2010, when a large loop current frontal eddy formed along the northern side of the loop current. It was a merger of 3 smaller loop current frontal eddies that moved anticyclonically clockwise around the loop current. If you look for the capital M, capital C, and the arrow, it points to this feature. This circulation caused a large-scale entrainment of oil towards the loop current. The daily locations of a surface drifter deployed by Horizon Marine are shown using large dots connected with lines. This drifter is seen to move from the west towards the cyclonic eddy, and it was entrained between the loop current and the eddy at the time of this image was acquired. The oil is not shown in this panel, but it followed the track of the drifter as the drifter moved southeast towards the loop current. Fortunately, the oil remained in this big feature and didn't continue on along the eastern edge of the loop current towards the Florida Keys. The vector currents that you see there show the direction of circulation within the loop current frontal eddy and current speeds within this large eddy. These are examples of data synthesis that I am proposing. Although I didn't focus on the shelf in these examples, this image shows a lot of SST detail, especially around the Mississippi River Delta, and SST detail extending along the Northeast Gulf Shelf all the way to Florida. So I think these data would be very appropriate for merging with the HF radar, the high frequency radar current data. The right panel shows warm core eddy Yazoo on August 16th of this year when it was still attached to the loop current. In the figure, two types of satellite data are shown, the declouded GCOOS SST data again, and Bob Laban's real-time sea surface height data. Over the past 25 years, we have found this product very useful in supporting the understanding and prediction of the ocean's influence on hurricane intensity changes in the Gulf. It's most useful during hurricane events when superimposed with the predicted track of the hurricane, as then you can see what features the hurricane will likely encounter along its path. Another consideration is that the sea surface temperature data needs to be optimally enhanced, especially in summer, when the SST gradients are very weak in the Gulf. Slide 2, please. Okay, so I'm using the format that was given to me. So since its inception, the mission of the EarthScan Lab has been emergency response, education, and research. The department's mission is more heavily weighted to education and research, of course. As I said earlier, I'm proposing an expansion of the synthesis of near real-time satellite products with the in situ products that GCOOS is showing on their webpage, especially interested in expanding the use in terms of the HF radar data. Slide 3, please. Slide 3 gives additional details on this proposal. So useful oceanographic satellite products that come to mind are sea surface temperature, chlorophyll A, true color, and microwave salinity from a variety of sensors. These include the GCOOS SST images as well as SST from polar orbiting satellite sensors, which include MODIS, VIIRS, and then a European sensor named Sentinel-3, which has become very popular because it has a higher spatial resolution. Other satellite-derived products of great potential, I feel, are the ocean heat content maps, which you just saw from the previous speaker, and a long-track sea surface height data so that users and modelers can evaluate how new or old the contoured sea surface height data is in a particular location in the Gulf at a particular time. One thing I wanted to point out is I did notice that during the Ida event, which was last year, and Hurricane Ida hit Louisiana, as you probably know, there were a great variety of ocean heat content maps appearing in the media and on weather forecasts, and they were very different than some of the NOAA-sponsored maps, and they didn't look similar at all. And this did not make me feel good because I think the ocean community needs to make sure they're vetting the data properly before it's getting to these other sources. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody. I just did notice that there was a big discrepancy in what different people were using. So this points to the critical need for vetting satellite data products and the drive products before use. In summary, I believe that many GCOOS user groups, including the U.S. Coast Guard, would benefit from ready access to a Gandalf-like webpage, specifically developed for the HF radar current systems in the Gulf, which are more coastal systems, or alternatively, an expansion of the satellite-derived products on the Gandalf page. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nan. Very interesting and concise.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, we're going to move on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Stephen Howden, another professor, professor at the School of Ocean Science and Engineering at the University of Southern Mississippi. Steve, please take it away.
Thank you. So as Pat said, I'm a professor in the School of Ocean Science and Engineering. And within the school, I've been running the Central Gulf of Mexico Coastal Ocean Observing System since 2004. And then since 2000, or 2001, I've additionally been directing the Hydrographic Science Research Center. And I've been a board member since 2011. And involved with GCOOS since somewhere around the 2004 time period, or between 2004 and 6. Next slide, please. So the primary mission, so as Nan pointed out, she is within a public university. And so USM is a public student-centered research university. And so we share the mission of the university, which is primarily, teaching and research. And then going down to the school level, the mission there is teaching and research that are focused on the marine environment. And then the Hydrographic Science Research Center's mission is to assess trends in the science of hydrography and ocean mapping, develop innovative techniques and technologies capturing these trends, and then implementing the techniques and technologies into ocean mapping and hydrographic operations. The observing system that I run, as I wrote on the slide, is essentially the same as GCOOS. So the mission of the GCOOS is to provide on-demand information about the Gulf's coastal and open ocean waters that is accurate, reliable, and benefits people, ecosystems, and the economy. And then we go beyond that a bit because of our mission within the university to provide educational opportunities that include skills required for the IUS enterprise. And some of the students that have been funded for involvement in SINGOOS have gone on to operational oceanography places like the Navy, private industry, and other and academia. And then facilitating research that's leveraging ocean observations, and then taking research developments and using those to enhance monitoring operations. So that brings in the research and the educational mission into what we do at SINGOOS. So when I looked at the question, what do you think is the most important strategic issue? One thing that's really important for us is capturing the information on who uses our data and what they use it for. One of the things with IUS is that there are multiple paths to obtaining data, and so it's really impossible at the level of operation that I have to monitor that. And so it would be useful to us if there was a more organized way within IUS to capture the users and the uses of the data. Next slide. So looking at our top two needs in terms of coastal hazards. One is updated coastline and bathymetry data. This region has a lot of changing coastline. There's a lot of coastal wetlands and coastal land loss. And so the modeling that's done using that data sometimes gives results that are incorrect. And the other need is for operational models to assimilate surface currents in the northern Gulf of Mexico. That way the currents can help keep the models closer to reality. And then it also provides a better forecast for things like search and rescue or other needs for surface currents, if there's an oil spill again. Two top current or emerging information needs. One is a robust shelf to deep water monitoring system for upper ocean heat content and barrier layers. We've got the glider project that's going very well. One of the challenges in the Gulf of Mexico is the ocean atmosphere interface because there's a challenge with some of the long duration surface vessels that monitor that interface. Both the sail drone and wave gliders require a certain amount of wind to either generate waves or generate propulsion for the sails. And in the summer, we have a lot of times where the winds are very weak, but we still have the eddy field, the currents, and those platforms lose navigation. And so they can be difficult with all the infrastructure in the water to use for getting that interface. And so there needs to be some alternatives, long duration surface vessels for that. And then we need to fill some of the big gaps in coverage in the Gulf of Mexico for HF radar. Our gaps are very large. We have, a big one in the west and a big one in the east of the Gulf of Mexico. And then just thinking from our organizational standpoint, one of the things that would help our organization's mission is to build in an inflation index into operational funding. And I think that's it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Steve. I think that last point you brought up will, raise the interest of a lot of people, and I doubt you'll get any disagreement on that. So thanks. Let's move on to the next speaker. That is Dr. Yonggang Liu. He's the director of the Ocean Circulation Lab, College of Marine Science at the University of South Florida. Yonggang, please take it away.
Thank you, Pat. My name is Yonggang Liu. Probably most people are not familiar with me, but you guys are more familiar with Dr. Bob Weisberg, who is my PhD advisor and a long-term collaborator and supervisor in the USF. He retired this year, and I took the leadership of Ocean Circulation Lab, and I promoted to associate research professor this year. Right now, I'm leading the lab. But the work I've done within this lab is a accumulation of more than 20 years of work, sustained work, coordinated ocean observing and modeling on the Western Shelf. Next page, please. We maintain a coordinated ocean observing and modeling components for the Western Shelf, try to better understand the ocean circulation and the variation on different time scales. And we maintain, currently, we have 4 real-time surface moorings, measuring the meteorological and ocean water column data sets, including velocity, temperature, salinity, at different depths, and deliver those data in real time to NOAA and DBC eventually, because this asset primarily funded by GCOOS, not GCOOS. But in the future, I would hope some GCOOS could consider some to help us to expand the observation efforts on the Western Shelf. We have maintained 2 sets of coastal ocean circulation models. One is called West Florida Coastal Ocean Circulation Model. We call WFCOM. The other is Tampa Bay Coastal Ocean Model. It's much higher resolution, focused on Tampa Bay only. Both models has been maintained for daily nowcast forecast for many years. WFCOM for over 10 years and Tampa Bay model for over 5 years. So they are reliable models for has been maintained for many years. We try to use these observing and modeling resources for a lot of applications, starting back to more than 10 years ago, Deepwater Horizon application, and now mostly for airtide tracking and prediction. For some emergency cases from last year in Tampa Bay, there was an untreated wastewater discharge, emergency discharge in Tampa Bay. We were able to use our model to track the plume, how the plume evolved in the Tampa Bay and flushed out of Tampa Bay. And also, it's important to guide the local agency, Tampa Bay HU program, to use to distribute the limited resources to collect water samples within Tampa Bay. And particularly this year, Hurricane Ian, we were able to use our both models to forecast the negative storm surge within Tampa Bay and storm surge to the south of the Fort Myers region 3 days in advance. And NOAA's request, we provide this information to NOAA, and also we share our model forecast. The local community received very positive feedbacks from many people. Because Pierre showed a map which showed a NOAA 3 day in advance advisory. It was forecast that the Hurricane Ian would head our way in Tampa Bay, and according to 3 day in advance advisory. But our model clearly, forecast that the accurate path and affected area 3 days in advance. So those are the applications that we've done. Also, our model results have been accessed constantly by NOAA OR and our office. We know that because when we have disk failure or anything hack up on our side, they will send an email, ask what happened on their side. We cannot access model. So also from this year on, Coast Guard start to ingest our models into their search rescue system. So there's a lot of applications. These are demonstrate the coordinated observing and modeling program for this region. So I hope this could help GCOOS to consider their priorities in the future. So the most important strategy issue to GCOOS, I would think, there's not enough offshore real-time observations on the Western Shelf, particularly the northern parts of the Western Shelf. From the center to south Florida part, Secure founded 2 real-time moorings, and we leverage other resources, maintain in total 4 real-time moorings, but there's none for the northern part of Western Shelf. It'd be good for GCOOS to consider in the future. Next page, please. So for the next 2 years, I would think the need for our group will be to have better surface wind product and open boundary forcing so that we can improve our coastal ocean circulation models. Like I said, it'd be good to add more moorings in the northern part of the Western Shelf. Right now, there's a gap over there. For longer term, I would think would like to have more chemical biological measurements on those buoys. Currently, mostly are physical oceanography variables, including meteorology and physical oceanography variables, but no biological time series available. Because we, the next panel, you will see that we have collaboration with FRI, try to make a lot of application in very tight research and applications. We started to set up a biological model for the Western Shelf. So those time series biological measurements would be very important for the in longer term. Also, HVR gaps for the northern part of the shelf. There's a big gap there. Need to be filled out in the next 5 years. So if the question GCOOS asked, one thing to do to help our group would be, obtain more and stable funding to maintain those coordinated coastal ocean observing and modeling programs for the Western Shelf. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Younggang. Very interesting. We're going to move on in the interest of time. We're running a little bit late here. The next speaker is Deborah Hernandez, the Executive Director of one of our sister regional associations, SACORA, the Southeast Coastal Ocean Observing Regional Association. Take it away, Deborah, please.
Thanks very much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in y'all's meeting today. Can I just get a thumbs up that y'all can hear me all right? Yes? Great, thanks. Next slide. as Pat just mentioned, SICORA is another regional association, so our mission is very similar to GCOOS. We're primarily about collecting the observations that are necessary to support community, economic, and ecosystem resilience. And how we do that work is through partnerships with the academic community, with the private community, and also with local governments, NGOs, et cetera. When it comes to coastal hazards, which is the topic of this panel, I decided to leave off the gorilla in the room, hurricanes, which I know a lot of you, the previous speakers, have addressed, and also not to speak directly to climate change and the sea level rise associated with it. But from a strategic perspective, the coastal hazards that we're actively developing both observing systems and products for are rip currents. We're partnering with NOAA to use cameras to help both provide situational awareness and to help validate and improve their modeling. For beach water quality, and GCOOS does a lot of this work as well. We're looking at issues related to HAB, sargassum, and also bacterial contamination as hazards that are very critical to impacting coastal communities. We're building tools that enable local level decision makers, weather forecast offices, et cetera, Coast Guard, to have situational awareness, because we have observing systems in place that are informing their decision making. But far and away, the thing that we're making the biggest investments in right now is trying to improve our high resolution understanding of flood impacts, whether it's related to storms or rainy day flooding, tide, sea level rise, et cetera. So for all these coastal hazards, we're trying to figure out how to enable communities to have the information they need to make decisions. Next slide, please. So in terms of near-term and long-term needs around coastal hazards, and particularly with flooding, we initiated last year a low-cost water level network. We've installed between 70 and 80 new water level sensors. When I say low cost, these are in the $500 to a couple $1,000 range. They're being installed in partnership with academic, private sector, and community partners. What we're spending a lot of time right now on is developing both station installation standards and best management practices, and additionally making sure everyone's using appropriate metadata and data transmission standards, so that when the data and information comes into SICORA, it can have very broad uses and applications, all the way up to for NOAA and the Weather Service with their flood advisories, but also so that it makes sense to a local emergency manager or city official. So in collaboration with communities, in addition to providing the technical assistance on figuring out what sensors will work for them, where they should be installed, how they should be installed, we're also working with these communities to understand flood hazard thresholds. You know, what infrastructure will be impacted at what level based on the data they're receiving. And all of that takes a good bit of time and effort and individual communication to make sure both the local needs are being met, but they're all the infrastructure is being installed in a way that everyone understands the accuracy and the precision of the data. So that's some near-term work that we're doing, and we're excited to be able to partner with some other regional associations with some of this work as well. Longer term, we're looking at what sort of data and tools for accessing the data will best meet community needs. Is it a text that people can sign up for? Is it an app for the phone? So that's the next stage of this new water level network, is to come up with appropriate data access tools. And then finally, because we're looking at different hazards and different sensors, a longer term need for us will be around integrated multi-hazard products, where you could have a low-cost web camera, a low-cost water level sensor, and potentially also be integrating model output, so that folks have a suite of a suite of sensor streams to use to help them make decisions about various sorts of alerts and actions that need to take place at the community level. So my final message in terms of this request around what GCOOS could do, our approach is around building community and building capacity, and not around competition. And we're finding that at the local level, and we're really excited to be doing that with our neighboring RAs, particularly with GCOOS as well, since we share this really big geography on the West Florida shelf. And that's all I wanted to say. Thanks again for the time and attention.
Thank you very much, Deborah. We're going to move on to our final presentation. Tim Osborne, the manager of the Central Gulf Coast NOAA Office of Coast Survey. Tim, take it away, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very, very important discussions that are being having about coastal hazards. In the last 6 years, we've had over 114 named storms in the Atlantic Basin, and each of those 6 years, including this year, we've had a Category 5 or a Category 5 hurricane make landfall across the Gulf. And most of the coastal states that we're working with are really seeing more and more populations moving to the coast. In fact, 40% of the population in the US lives there now, with about 60 million jobs. The issues that we're seeing in terms of what we're working with on slide 2 is essentially dealing in a collaborative basis with coastal hazards across many, many, many different federal, state partners, academic, local emergency managers. The talk that was just given talking about looking for the installation operation of low cost, easy to implement MET stations is a constant request from so many local emergency managers and counties that we work with. Basically, tell me what I could buy, I'll install it. Is there some basic guidelines about, what it should be in terms of location, installation? Apps are perfectly fine. A lot of them are coming with that. And having a website through the local county or emergency management showing in real time these winds are very important, as well as water levels. Primary mission for us is working collaboratively, not only within NOAA. Our hydro survey data is used constantly by the National Hurricane Center and state entities in terms of looking at flood models, getting good bathymetry across the shelf, working with IUs and our partners with co-ops and establishing and using and referencing tide and water level stations, not only in support of the VDATA model that we're running and operating and trying to improve, but also with operational forecast systems. And this goes back to the University of South Florida as an example, where not only do we have a hydrographic survey initiative with them, but as you just heard from USF, we're working with them constantly, and really a huge advocate of academic entities like USF, which have enormous experience in developing coastal models local, not only to the Tampa Bay, but also to the shelf across Western Florida, that we think really are very important and absolutely critical during an inbound storm such as an Ian, things like that. Tropical storms and hurricanes are just not a matter of when these operational systems or operational forecast coastal models are important any given day. 60% of the observed water levels of the Gulf of Mexico today is not tidal or astronomical, it's weather driven. So this is really important. Increasing, so when you have 114 named storms and you have hurricanes like Hurricane Sally, which actually send you on a race across the coast from an anticipated landfall in South Louisiana all the way over to it just missing Mobile Bay and hitting Orange Beach, Florida, and Perdido, the importance of real-time coastal stations becomes even more critical. There's only so many assets that we can move around and put in front of a storm or send into a storm, and stations, fixed stations, are really critical because the coastal populations are populating all across the geography, and having these stations, having more stations, even offshore, wave buoys, such as we saw with Nicole, which were just amazing in terms of observing the storm wave heights there and how it devastated so many areas of the Atlantic seaboard on Florida, are really one of the things that is so much in need at this time. If you go to the next slide, what are the two emerging issues that we really have? I'd actually like to move up the support of operational forecast models like we are doing with in partnership with USF as being one of those critical ones. Looking and giving as much advanced information we can to coastal states and coastal populations about an inbound storm and coastal surge is really absolutely critical. And you know, you can only go so far with one model. Having multiple models, STOFs now converting over to STOFs, ADCERT, SLOSH, the USF models, all of these, NGOFs too, all of these just keep building and building a better referencing and a better way of forecasting what a future storm or an inbound storm has. I think every one of those really benefits from these densification of stations, looking at gap analysis, where stations are. When a Hurricane Laura goes right over one of our hurricane hardened stations in Calcasieu Pass, and we get a perfect real-time observation of that eye of that storm going right over, everyone really just thinks it's terrific. When we see Ida making landfall over Port Fourchon and we have no observation, really hardened observation stations there, and the National Weather Service Hurricane Center just has to basically infer the severity of the winds and the storm surge itself from actual post observations in the field, that really gives rise to why the gap analysis is so important and the partnership with GCOOS is so key. We can only install so many stations. If you look at Texas A&M, they've absolutely have taken the initiative and created not only an amazing system like Ticoon right now, but in the Port Corpus area and Brownsville area, they've densified and created an operational forecast network out there that's joined the NOAA port system to make an enormous dent on the needs of that area. It's one of the fastest growing ports in the world. It has enormous infrastructure in terms of LNG export terminals. It's one of the first ports in the United States actually bringing in super tankers to the dock itself. So this just gives rise to why the gap analysis really creates an opportunity for us to find out where do we really need to partner with the people like Texas A&M, like USF, to look at increasing the amount of observation stations that we have and to couple them with the opportunities to develop and further and support, as we are with USF, the coastal observation models that they're maintaining right now and hopefully improving. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. And I want to thank all the speakers for very informative presentations. And I also want to apologize to everybody on the meeting for my pretty poor time management on this. I'm afraid I didn't leave too much time for questions here. We should be able to get a few in. So without further ado, I'll open the floor to questions. Nancy.
With with so many excuse me, with so many information needs and so many sites that need to be monitored, how can GCOOS prioritize these important issues?
Did you want to direct that to anybody in particular or to anybody in general?
Open mic.
I'll
Okay.
start, Nancy. Good to
Give a
see you.
15-second answer. I think it should be based upon where we're seeing the demand. The demand right now with coastal populations are on wind, real-time winds, real-time water levels / surge, and near shore, offshore, wave and current. These are the things that are the most devastating or impactful to inbound coastal storms, but even with northern cold fronts during the winter storm season, which is actually the most impactful season of the year for the Gulf Coast states. If we follow that demand, then I think we can really build a base of support for trying to serve their needs.
Sure. I'm sorry. Stephen.
I was just responding to the question, sorry. One of the, when you look at the gaps in the high frequency radar coverage, the east and west gap in the Gulf of Mexico, the size of that is larger than the mid-Atlantic bight. And the western gap, of course, there's a lot of offshore oil and gas operations, a lot of fisheries, but you know, it's a really hard place to operate HF radar. And Tim was mentioning the hurricane hardened water level stations, which I think there are 2 of in all of Louisiana. And that we really need more of those with HF radar on them. There's with the single antenna systems, long range stations, because really you need, if you want to get the water level throughout a hurricane in that area, you're going to need those types of stations. And if you want radars that you don't have to evacuate during a hurricane like that, you need those types of stations. So I think they should be a high priority, but those are very expensive.
Can I respond? At one time, GCOOS put money into ADC or HF radars in the Delta, and I'm not on the board anymore, so I'm not following that. But from a meeting I was just out with the Gulf Research Program and a person from FEMA, the most deaths occur due to storm surge. And how can we make that, not that it's any more important than property loss, but it's people. And how can we make those predictions better and influence the communities that live in the path of a hurricane, that this is really important?
I think we've had a lot of success with that. And I think a lot of the GCOOS membership have really helped us a lot. Ken Graham with the National Hurricane Center, now with the National Weather Service, has remarked when he was here in coastal Louisiana just after Ida, talking about the fact that there have been many fewer deaths in the years after Hurricane Sandy than actually during Hurricane Sandy. So the warnings and the coordination with coastal populations through the local emergency managers have seen, you know, when you think about the fact that we had 6 consecutive years of Cat 4, Cat 5 landfalls in the Gulf Coast, and it hasn't resulted in a mass casualty event, I think that's done a lot to show how much success we are in terms of coastal populations believing the need and the risk and getting out of those areas. The problem is the fact that we still have a lot of gaps, just like was just referenced, where we don't have any observations that really can see what these storms are doing in specific areas. And, you know, the two fastest growing states in America, Florida, number 2, over 21 million today. Texas, fastest growing, even over Florida, and both have extensive coastal populations living literally in view of the open water. And we have a lot of very, very large gaps of observation points that can actually continue reporting throughout a storm event itself.
Yeah, may I say something about Nancy's comments on how to choose which part? I mean, there's a lot of gaps to fill. What the priority? If it's limited resources, we know that we have a GCOOS, both GCOOS and Secure funded glider program. I mean, they also have a large team of glider groups to measure ocean heat content, so that supposed to be helpful in better forecast hurricane intensity and path. During Hurricane Ian, there's no single glider in water. I mean, there was return real-time data on moorings on the Western Shelf, which is mainly funded by Secure and leveraged through other projects. So we need to think about it. Gliders, yeah, kind of is very useful. I'm not asking to call the glider funding. Okay, my point is fixed point observation, time series observation with real-time transmission is very important. Fill the gap in the northern part of Florida, West Florida Shelf. Yeah, that's probably a very #1 priority for GCOOS to consider. Thank you.
That was a very provocative question, Nancy. Thank you. We're at time, so I'm going to turn it over to Joe. And again, I apologize for not leaving more time for questions, but Joe, why don't you bring us home and close us out?
Okay, Pat, thanks. I just wanted to pass out kind of a philosophical question, not necessarily that anyone here will answer right now, but I think back to my days at Fleet and Americal at NDBC, so on and so forth, and I recall all the work that was going in to improve hurricane intensity forecasting and also hurricane intensity decreasing forecasting. And I'm thinking about what I've seen right next door to me in Wilbur by the Sea, and I think back to Sandy, and I think back to Sally, and I wonder if it's time to start thinking about modeling storm surge intensity. I mean, it's one thing to have storm surge, and here comes the water, it comes up, you flood, whatever, but when you combine the coastal topography, the wind with the current storm, the fetch, the water level, you know, the anticipated surge, and make that a dynamic model to really capture the force that's coming in with this water, I think that could be a very, very valuable tool. And again, there's no, 5-minute resolution or answer to that thought, but I just throw it out there as something that maybe some research group should take a look at, because I think it's a definite factor. I think it's reality. Thanks, Pat.
Joe, I think I'd like to comment on that, in that people look at the wind fields and they look at the flooding level. They're not looking at the storm surge possibility. And that can be the most devastating for a coastal community. And how can we get those messages more priority in hurricane predictions and forecasts?
Yeah,
I think the NOAA Coastal Inundation Dashboard is a pretty good tool. Of course, you have to have a tide gauge for it to show up, your location to show up in that. But they do show, they give you a quick look at water level gauges, and also you can click on for it to display the forecast water levels as well.
Yeah, I'd like to comment. Joe, you point out the need. Our group's work exactly align with this in this direction. Build a 3-dimensional model, not 2-dimensional. There are some sources that use 2-dimensional model. It's 3-dimensional chain. So fully 3-dimensional model with nowcast forecast capability. It's not handcast. I mean, a lot of the sources or statistics. Statistics could be useful, but for a real-time forecast like this, you need a model with forecast capability. More try to represent the real ocean states and make forecasts. We already started in this direction. Right now, we are developing our ocean circulation model. It's pretty mature now. Next step, we're going to couple with waves model to better improve the surge prediction, and also try to nesting with inland hydrological model so that we can better simulate the flooding in the coastal area, also on land. So this is the research direction we're working on. Need funding, which is already.
Yeah, you also, I mean, if you want to get the details right on the storm surge, you have to have updated, good bathymetry and coastline in your model as well.
True, yeah. We have a mapping program in University of South Florida, funded by NOAA program. Just remap the bathymetry. It's very expensive. But bathymetry is very critical for accurate storm surge simulation. Yeah.
I'm going to have to interrupt. I thank everybody for the very healthy discussion, and again, apologize for not having more time for questions. But I want to make sure that everybody can at least get up and stretch before we go into the next session, which starts in just a couple of minutes. So thank you again to all the speakers. Very interesting and informative presentations. And we'll start again at 2:30. Kirsten or Joe, anything you want to add to this, or shall we go from there?
Yeah, we can just give everybody a 2-minute break and we will start back up.
So we're going to go with 10 minutes or
2.
2-minute break. Yep. Okay. So get a correction. Enjoy it. All right. Thanks.
We do have a little wiggle room.
That's not going to help me.
We do have a little wiggle room in the afternoon. So if you want to do like a 5-minute break, that's fine too.
Okay. 5-minute break. So 2:33
Thank
Central
you.
Time.
The restroom is further away than 2 minutes.
Yes.
Thank
Get
you.
up and stretch. 5-minute break. 2:33 or 3:33, depending on your time zone.